Joining us now is Sky News Washington correspondent Annalise Nealon. Analyze, before we get to the flooding situation in North Carolina, I want to talk about the vice presidential debate. Historically, vice presidential debates don't get a lot of attention, but this year seems to be a little different. There's a lot more focus, and the stakes feel higher. The polls seem to indicate that the debate was essentially a tie, but I personally thought Vance came out on top. What was your take on it? Who do you think won or lost, if that's even the right way to put it? Well, it's interesting because I watched the debate with a group of Republican supporters, and for them there was a lot of enthusiasm and a sense of victory, which in their eyes was a clear win. But when I took a step back and looked at the debate more objectively, focusing on strategy, rhetoric, and overall stage presence, J.D. Vance seemed to be the clear winner. His performance was sharp and polished, and he certainly seemed more comfortable on stage than his opponent. The real question in any political campaign, however, is whether these types of debates actually sway voters. While J.D. Vance may have won the debate in terms of presentation and rhetoric, the bigger question is whether his performance will move the needle with undecided voters or solidify support within his base. What Vance did do, however, was effectively neutralize one of the major criticisms the Trump campaign has been grappling with: the lingering controversy over Vance's past. Not too long ago, Vance was an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, even being called a rabid anti-Trump supporter. Over the years, he's done a complete 180, aligning himself closely with Trump and the Republican base. This sudden shift in stance has invited skepticism, with critics calling him inauthentic and opportunistic. A particularly toxic narrative emerged around Vance's comments about childless cat ladies being unhappy and supposedly making everyone else unhappy, which did not sit well with many women, especially suburban voters. This rhetoric had become a vulnerability for the campaign. But during the debate, Vance shifted his tone on this issue, which I think was a critical moment that hasn't been widely discussed. His acknowledgement that Republicans need to rebuild trust struck a chord. It signaled that he's aware of the perception problems and that he's making an effort to win back voters who may have been alienated by his past comments. Moreover, Vance's ability to acknowledge these criticisms while maintaining his loyalty to the broader Republican agenda gave Republicans on the ground, especially those running grassroots campaigns, something meaningful to share with voters. For some time, the Republican message has lacked cohesion, but this debate performance could help shift that narrative. It gives activists a renewed sense of direction and something tangible to say when they're knocking on doors and having those face-to-face interactions that are so critical in local campaign efforts. In that regard, this debate may have done more than just showcase Vance's debate skills. It could be a turning point for energizing the Republican base and giving them a unified message to rally behind. On the other hand, it was a tough night for Walz. He was personally picked by Kamala Harris, and she's been vocal about choosing him based on instinct and gut feeling. Unfortunately for the Democrats, it may not have been the best decision. There's been a significant backlash against Walz, with several controversies clouding his candidacy, particularly regarding his honesty. One of the most damaging stories that has surfaced is his claim that he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square protests. This story, whether true or not, has fueled a growing narrative about Walz's credibility. And it's not just this Hong Kong story that's under scrutiny. There have been questions about his military record, specifically the rank he held when he left the National Guard and whether he ever actually served in Iraq or Afghanistan during the Gulf War. These issues are problematic because they feed into the perception that Walz has a habit of embellishing his past, raising doubts about his trustworthiness. While these controversies may not be enough to change the minds of diehard supporters, they certainly help reinforce a narrative of dishonesty that opponents are likely to capitalize on. What's particularly striking in this regard is the contrast between Walz and Donald Trump. Trump is known for his exaggerations. He loves to brag and often inflates his accomplishments. But Trump does this in a way that his supporters find endearing and even humorous. It's part of his brand, and it makes him relatable to many people. Walz, on the other hand, seems to lack the same ability to balance exaggeration with humor. His embellishments don't come across as charming. Instead, they seem to undermine his credibility. This was evident during the debate when J.D. Vance unexpectedly agreed with him on a point. Walz was clearly caught off guard and seemed to short-circuit for a moment. This lapse in composure highlighted Waltz's inexperience in debates and put him at a disadvantage against Vance, who is not only a seasoned lawyer but also an experienced debater. This disparity between Waltz's performance and the Democratic Party's expectations for him raises serious questions. Did the Democrats make a significant mistake in choosing Waltz? There has been considerable debate about why they didn't go with someone like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, who has a stronger presence and more national media experience. Waltz, on the other hand, has only done one major interview since his selection, and even that was with Kamala Harris. He has virtually no national media experience, and it showed during the debate. Throwing someone so inexperienced into the national spotlight in such a critical election cycle feels like a gamble that hasn't paid off. Even CNN moderators pointed this out, noting that both Waltz and Harris have avoided the media, leaving them ill-prepared for high-pressure situations like national debates. This media avoidance is problematic because it doesn't just limit their visibility. It also deprives them of opportunities to hone their messages and sharpen their arguments. Leaders who will represent America on the world stage must be media savvy, adept at handling tough questions, and prepared for the kind of combative environment that debates often present. Waltz's performance, unfortunately, did little to inspire confidence that he's ready for this level of scrutiny. What's also remarkable is the atmosphere on the ground. I attended a watch party in North Carolina, and one conversation that stood out to me was a lighthearted discussion among attendees about the theft of Trump-Vance yard signs. They joked about how bad it was during the 2020 election, noting that things weren't nearly as intense this time around. This anecdote may seem trivial, but it reflects a broader trend. The heightened tensions and extreme emotions that characterize the 2020 election aren't as prevalent this year. The atmosphere feels less charged, and that could be a good sign for Republicans. If voters feel less pressure and less opposition, they may be more motivated to turn out for Trump and Vance, especially in states like North Carolina where voter enthusiasm is critical. In conclusion, while the vice presidential debate may not have changed the entire political landscape, it did provide important insights into the strengths and weaknesses of both campaigns. J.D. Vance's performance, while not earth-shattering, managed to stabilize some of the Trump campaign's vulnerabilities and gave Republicans a message to rally around. On the other hand, Tim Waltz's struggles on the debate stage highlighted the challenges Democrats face in convincing voters that he's more than a symbolic pick. Whether this debate will have a lasting impact on the election remains to be seen, but it certainly set the stage for some important conversations to come.